Dobar večer. Dobar večer, good evening, and welcome to another one in the series of scientific evenings organized by University of Nova Gorica. For those of you who are new, this is a series of presentations by world-renowned scientists accomplished in various fields of science and technology to introduce fields of interest to the University of Nova Gorica, but to the broader community as well. My name is Tanya Dominko. I belong to one of the new centers that university established recently, and it's housed in this building. And it's my distinct pleasure today to introduce the speaker, Lene Rasmussen. She comes to us from University of Copenhagen in Denmark. She is, besides being an accomplished professor and scientist, now managing director of the Center for Healthy Aging that belongs to the same university. Lene has a very distinguished career. Today she's going to talk to us about interdisciplinarity, and it's interesting to understand that she has her background in chemical engineering and then molecular genetics, and so it's very appropriate that she recognizes the importance of interdisciplinarity when tackling very, very complex and big problems. One of them we're going to discuss today about complexity of aging. A brief introduction of her many, many accomplishments as well. She has spent time doing postdoctoral training at Harvard, University in Boston, University of Massachusetts Medical School, visited very important places and did research at Johns Hopkins and NIH, National Institute of Health in the United States. And without further ado, and if anybody is interested, we will make her resume available. But without delaying any further, Lene, please introduce your speech.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank for the invitation to be here. I mean, it is really fantastic. It is my first time in Slovenia, and I must say that you have a fantastic place here. I don't think that's comparable to any other research institute in the world. That must be a lot of inspiration for doing good science to be here. And I'm very happy that so many people could find time to come here and listen to the talk tonight. So what I'm going to talk about is healthy aging. Not just aging, but healthy aging. And I'm going to talk about an interdisciplinary approach that our Center for Healthy Aging in Copenhagen has done in order to do some research in this area. Before I do that, I'm going to do a little introduction. So, because why are we interested in aging? Well, one reason that aging has been a focus for many research areas recently in many countries is the fact that very, very soon there will be more elderly people than children or young people in the world. As you can see, these two curves, they are getting dramatically different. And that is a potential problem or a challenge, would somebody say. So where does this happen? This happens essentially around the world, except for a few places in Africa. But it's a very critical problem here in Europe, in North America, China, and Australia. So since it is a major problem, potential problem here in Europe, of course, many European countries, including Denmark, has been interested in trying to come up with solutions to this new challenge. So the bad news here is that no matter what, then we will all get old. And I think it is important here to emphasize that aging is actually a natural process. which starts from we are born, or maybe even before we are born, depending on how you look at it, but it's a natural process. And at some point, we reach a state in the life that we call old. So that's the bad news. So the good news is that it is actually possible to get old in a good way. The question is, how do we do it? And that is something, a big question that I'm not going to answer tonight, but hopefully some of the research we are doing can give inspiration to people how to get old in a good way. So the fact that we are getting old has made people essentially look for miracles, for cures, for medicines, drugs, etc. Anything that can prevent this process. Some of it perhaps will help, some of it not. But it's a big chaos at the moment, what really helps. So let's go back and see, because this is really nothing new. If you look at paintings from previous, you will see that people were actually thinking the same way, even though they might not get 100 years old. So this is a painting of Fountains of Youth. So there was this desire all the time probably to maintain youth and get older and older in a good way. So let's get back and see what happens to the body when we are getting old. So there are some physical signs of aging, of human aging. One of them is very common that, well, you don't hear that well anymore, and at some point you might need a hearing aid. That's a natural process by aging. You also are not that fast, maybe, anymore, so you don't walk that fast, you don't jump that fast, and you get tired more easily. The reason I'm mentioning these signs is that if you want to do research in aging, it's important to have some markers that can actually tell you, is this a good or bad aging? So these are some facts that happens when you get older. What about the brain? There's a saying that old people are stupid. That might be the case, but they were probably also stupid when they were younger. So there's, as far as I know, no evidence that older people are more stupid than younger people, fortunately. There are a lot of myths in this field. So one of them you will meet, or probably have met already, is that we have death genes that will determine when we'll die. That is false, but to a certain extent it's actually right, because the genetic makeup of the individual people, that will actually have an influence. You can, for example, inherit defective genes that will predispose you to various diseases. It could be cancer, it could be Alzheimer's, etc. So there could be maybe some truth to this. We are to blame for that we age. That is not true. We all age, as I said, it's a natural process. What we might be blamed for is that how we treat ourselves, whether it's a healthy or unhealthy aging, but we cannot determine whether we age. That's a natural process. So we hear this all the time, at least in Denmark, we will all be 120 years. That is false. Some people, few might be, perhaps more in the future, but we will definitely not all be 120 years. But if you look at how these figures have changed, you can see that the percentage of elder people above 80, that's definitely increasing. So you can imagine it would increase even more in the future. Then there's this thing that I like very much, that is that women live longer than men. Well, it is partly true, because if you look here, you can see that there are more women than men above 70 and 80. But in general, you cannot say that women live longer than men. Some do, some do not. Then here, in recent years, exercise has become very popular. And exercise is a wonder drug. Is that true? Well, to a certain extent, it is true. It is perhaps the only really drug so far that has been shown really to affect the healthy aging. Whether it affects longevity, how long you live, that's not clear, but it definitely affects the health span. That means that the number of years that you have a healthy aging. So that is one thing that is to keep in mind, and that will be a part of probably a lot of aging research in the future. That will be physical activity is important for healthy aging. So there are also other aspects to it. So, for example, and that could be one reason that a lot of or more people are getting older, but there are a different mentality, so how to get old, because it used to be connected with something negative. It's aging, it's burdened, old people, too many, etc. But I think this has, it is starting to turning really. So this is more like a challenge that could be converted into something positive, actually. And even people are talking about it as a resource. But that does not mean that just because you change people's mind about aging, that this will actually solve these demographic problems I showed in the beginning. But it is definitely beginning to change the way we think about aging and the activities connected, associated with aging in our countries. So this, of course, having said all this, that also became clear that it was an important thing for Denmark. And at the University of Copenhagen Faculty of Health and Medical Sciences, which is University of Copenhagen is the largest, biggest university in Denmark. And here are some facts about the medical faculty, which could give you an impression about the size of this faculty. The dean of the faculty decided a number of years ago, together with the rector of the university, that it would be a very good idea if University of Copenhagen would make aging research a priority. And they decided that the aging research should sort of be focused on or be centered around the medical faculty. So by getting private donations from a number of private foundations, for example, the Novo Nordisk Foundation. Novo Nordisk is a big biotech company in Denmark, primary famous or recognized for production of insulin and diabetes research and medication in general. So they donated a considerable amount of money to the medical faculty of University of Copenhagen to start up centers to do research in protein research, basic metabolic research, and also stem cell biology. In addition to that, another foundation, which is the Nordea Foundation. Nordea is a Scandinavian bank, and they have a foundation that supports good life. And they decided a number of years ago to donate a grant to University of Copenhagen so they could start this Center for Healthy Aging. This is the medical campus at University of Copenhagen, and at the moment our research laboratories, they are sort of spread around in this building, but very soon they are finishing this brand new research tower where Center for Healthy Aging will occupy 3 floors, and this research tower is funded by the A.P. Møller Foundation, which is A.P. Møller was a big shipping company in Denmark. So a lot of these activities has been possible because of money from private foundations. So back to Center for Healthy Aging. So as I said, it started by a grant from the Nordea Foundation. We started up 1st of January 2009, so we're just about to finish the first 5 years. And the grant is a 10 years grant, which is also a new, very, very constructive way of starting centers in Denmark, because you can actually do research that is long-term and not just these short-term projects for 3 to 5 years. So that has made a huge difference. So it's an interdisciplinary research center. So we have researchers from very different fields, and I have listed some of the institutes here that they are affiliated with, because to give you an impression how different we are. So we have Biomedical Research Institute, we have cellular and molecular medicine, so that's for all the molecular biology, molecular aging work. Then we have neuroscience, and we have public health, social medicine, we even have dentists in our center. And then we have researchers from Faculty of Humanities, ethnologists who look at how people experience society and how society has an influence on aging, and anthropology, social science too. So as you can imagine, this is very, very broad in focus. And in order to do something together and really to do interdisciplinary research, you need to have a common question. You need to have something in common that you can all relate to and address this question using different scientific expertises, different assays, etc. And one thing that we could have in common in our center, and that is very important for aging, that is energy or vitality. So that is something that all our projects in the center, they have something to do with energy or vitality, whether you are a social scientist or you are a molecular biologist. So what do we hope actually will come out of this? Yeah, we hope that since we're a research center, we hope that we can contribute knowledge to look at how is energy formed in the cells and in the tissues and in the organs. So that's the biology, really, of aging. But what we are also interested in, because now we were talking about aging, people are getting tired, that is how different factors can actually affect the energy levels in humans. And how do we cope with everyday life when you are aging? That is very different, and that's probably also very different depending where you are living. There are a lot of factors actually in society that can be very important for whether you have a healthy aging or an unhealthy aging. And finally, I also want to mention that we find it very, very important to communicate our research, and we would very much like to interact actually with the society outside the university, which is not really very common, at least in Denmark, that universities, they actually have a close contact, research contact with the society. So I'll just give a few examples of how we are doing this. So scientifically, our research is can sort of be grouped in three groups. We call them themes. One theme is the social scientists, the ethnologists who look at how the community and the society and surroundings affect the aging process. Then we have the life course scientists, so that's the epidemiologists who follow people during age and see which signs there are, how they're changing. And then we have the biologists and the researchers looking at the biology of aging, including the neuroscientists. And then we have the intervention projects. And what are they? Yeah, we, for example, have 2 intervention projects, and we're doing them in collaboration with the city of Copenhagen and also actually 2 other smaller municipalities in Denmark. One of them is an intervention study where we will ask a number of people, so how do they experience the aging process in the municipality they are living in? Because that could be very different. For example, there are a lot of possibilities in Copenhagen, what you can do when you are an elderly person. But people do not necessarily use them. And if you have the same possibilities in the countryside, people might not even want to use them. They might want to do something else. So things like that can be very useful to know how that is different dependent on social status and geographical location, etc. And then we have this Wonder Drug, the exercise. And that's an intervention study with the city of Copenhagen, where we are going to train around, in first place, 200 senior citizens in order to test whether training and physical activity will actually make these people being able to stay at home for a longer time. So that is the intervention studies, and that is an example of how we are trying to interact, actually try to interact, invite the society into the university in a way. Okay, so let's look at the biology of aging. So it is clear, and we all know that we age differently. Some people get very old, and it's very unfair because some people can get very, very old even though that they are doing things that we are not supposed to do if we want a healthy aging. So why is this world so unfair? Well, let's first of all look at what happens to our body when we age. So it is a fact that there is a decrease in muscle mass and muscle strength when we age. And there is also a general decrease in the function of our organs. And on the other hand in hand with this, we see an increase in a number of diseases such as cancer, cardiovascular diseases, cataract, diabetes, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. So it looks like that our body is going down the drain, and at the same time we get more and more diseases. So it is clear that aging is a very complex process, and it is also really only partially understood. So as I said, that some people think that our bodies just wear out, while others think that aging can be prevented and maybe even reversed. Could be. But when we think about aging, we have to look at what happens to our body over time. And that is probably not the same for everybody. And there is a saying that it is all in the genes. So maybe the genetic makeup actually plays a role. And it certainly does, because this is an example, an extreme example. There are people that are born with genes defective in various aging genes. We can call them aging genes. And if you are unlucky and born with a defective aging genes, for example, like this Werner syndrome, you will premature age. So this is this woman when she was 15 years old, and as you see, when she was 48 years old, she looks like she's 80 or something like that. So it is clear that the genes play a role. What is interesting about these premature aging syndromes is that they are the genes, they are involved in preventing DNA damage. So these are some pathways that we know are important for aging. One of them is DNA damage prevention, and then we also know that insulin plays a role. But I will focus on this one. So how can our DNA or our genomes be damaged? They can be damaged by various external factors. Bacteria actually can generate DNA damage. Sunlight, we know that. Viruses, certain kind of pollutions, including cigarette smoking, radiations, and chemicals. This DNA damage has to be repaired, because otherwise our genomes will be destroyed, and maybe if we are unlucky, this destruction will happen in one of these aging genes. So fortunately, because this happens all the time, and we don't all get sick or premature aging, so fortunately we have a number of what we call DNA repair pathways. And what that essentially is that are proteins that remove the DNA damage from our cells so that the DNA damage is not persistent and our genomes are not destroyed. And there are several of these. Because, as I said a little earlier, if you accelerate this aging, you can actually also accelerate onset of disease. And if you look at these diseases, many of them actually are also associated to what I said, DNA damage, that our genomes get damaged. So perhaps some of these diseases and aging, they actually share the same mechanisms. So if we study these diseases, we might actually get some knowledge about how normal aging occurs. So that's what we are doing, and that's what many researchers are doing. So aging, it is complex, and nobody really knows what it is, but we just don't want it to happen to our bodies. But there are several theories of what is the mechanism of aging. So as I talked about already, aging genes, I didn't talk about telomeres. That is also related to our chromosomes. That is to protect the ends of our chromosomes so they don't get shorter and shorter. Because if they do that, you can imagine the cell will die. And then there is all these theories that DNA damage actually plays an important role in aging. And also something called mitochondria. So what is mitochondria? Mitochondria is essentially, or are essentially, the battery of our cells. So they are small organelles in our body that generate energy. So we can call them the heart of the cell, because if they are not functioning, our cells have no energy and we will actually die. So they are essential for that we can live actually. And how do we know that they are so important? Again, we can go back and look at people who are suffering from diseases. And people who suffer from diseases where they have dysfunctional mitochondria, they have actually problems in a number of different tissues. Skeletal muscle, heart, eye, liver, kidney, pancreas, blah, 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 etc. So essentially, a dysfunction of any organ, and this can happen at any time if your mitochondria suddenly stop functioning. But they are also important for a very common disease in the Western world, and that is cancer. Because if you look at mitochondria function in a number of different cancers, you will also see that there are problems with these little organelles. So energy seems to be very, very important for our body to function in a normal way and to prevent disease. So what are these small batteries actually doing on a normal day? Now I talked about disease and I just mentioned energy. So what are they doing? They are actually making sure that what we eat is converted into energy. That's essentially what they're doing. So if they are defective, we will have a lot of metabolic problems. So that is one very, very important thing. What they also do, if you look at them, so if they are dysfunctional, you can measure something called reactive oxygen species. And that is a molecule that is very, very reactive which can damage your DNA. If your mitochondria doesn't work, you will get increased number of these damaging molecules that essentially can ruin the cellular function, and that will also contribute to aging and disease. So there has to be a balance in the cell to prevent production of these reactive oxygen species. So where do they come from? Well, they come from the mitochondria, and they actually come from a chemical process that is normal in the mitochondria and which is essential for that we can convert the things we eat to energy. And that is called oxidative phosphorylation. If this reaction pathway is not normal, then the mitochondria will start producing a lot of these reactive oxygen species, which will damage DNA. Normally they are repaired by these repair pathways I talked about, but if there are too many, the cells cannot cope with them, and that will damage the DNA, something we call mutations. So if that's the case, then one would expect that if you look at the mitochondrial DNA and mitochondrial function in young people and compare to old people, then you would actually see a difference. And that is exactly what can be detected. What you see is actually that the DNA in the mitochondria is different in old age than when you are young. So there are some genetic changes going on during lifetime, and these genetic changes could actually affect function of the mitochondria. Okay, why am I talking about all this boring stuff about molecules and this and that? And I told you that our center is interdisciplinary and blah, blah, blah. Well, the thing is that we have utilized this knowledge in a big interdisciplinary project in our center. And let's go back. So we asked the question from the beginning, what can we do to promote healthy aging and prevent functional decline? And what are the signs of functional decline? And I just, in the beginning of the talk, mentioned some of the signs that you actually can detect as functional decline. So in a big collaboration within the center and a few collaborators from outside, we did a study where we looked at fatigue, because fatigue is a common sign of aging. So first, what is fatigue? Well, it is essentially that you experience exhaustion and you feel that you have less energy and you need more sleep and all these things that even young people also feel. This is a normal, actually, physical reaction of the body. And it is often, you can take it as a sign that you have sort of reached the limit of what your body can do. But there's also something that is called unexplained fatigue. And this unexplained fatigue, that is often occurring in elderly people. And this is one reason that he or she frequently visit the general practitioner. So we have all this knowledge also from the general practitioners in Denmark, where we have a collaboration which is very, very useful. And what you see is that this unexplained fatigue is very often a symptom of underlying disease, or it can be a reaction to certain kinds of medicine. And very often you cannot really diagnose a reason for this fatigue, and that is also the reason why it's called unexplained fatigue. So this is essentially, to a large extent, uncharacterized. So a research groups in our center, led by Kirsten Aulund, who has built up during the last 5 years a big biobank, which we call CAMP, Copenhagen Aging and Midlife Biobank. She has built up this biobank, and they have looked, so can we get any knowledge about this unexplained fatigue by looking at the individuals? So we looked at 8,500 individuals in this biobank. And what they found was that if you have this unexplained fatigue, many become dependent for help for daily activities after actually a reasonable short number of years. They very often have physical disabilities. They die before others very often. And what's also interesting is that they use multiple social and health services, and then they become more physically inactive, which is perhaps logical because they feel this fatigue. So what we don't really know here is that if this unexplained fatigue actually reflects an underlying biological problem. So in order to look at that and try to find biomarkers where you can predict whether you will suffer from this unexplained fatigue, we looked at a subgroup of this biobank, and that was around 200 males born in the Copenhagen area in 1953. So that's about middle age. So these individuals were tested for various parameters. They have went through cognitive tests, because we are also interested in looking for biomarkers for cognitive function. They had blood samples taken. They had physical tests where they had blood pressures, jump force, hand strength, chair raises, lung capacity, etc. And then they had this vitality score. And the vitality score is a measure of fatigue, really. So that's an international recognized way of grouping people in fatigue and non-fatigue. So in order to look at the biology between this fatigue, we looked at around 100 people who were fatigued and around 100 people who were not fatigued. And we took the blood samples, and then we measured various parameters in these blood samples that had all to do with energy and DNA damage. So we had also assays looking at mitochondrial function, so these batteries of the cells, the reactive oxygen, as I told you, that is damaging the DNA. We looked at whether there was any correlation between fatigue and DNA damage. We also looked actually at the end of the chromosomes, whether they were changing, and then we looked at nucleotide metabolism, because we know that mitochondrial function is important for cellular metabolism. We measured a lot and we compared a lot, and there was a lot of data, and most things we didn't really see a correlation. Interesting, what we did see a correlation between fatigue and non-fatigue was that there was an increased reactive oxygen production in the individuals that were complaining about unexplained fatigue. And then we also saw that there was an association between vitality and nucleotide metabolism. But the rest, mitochondrial function, blah, 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 nothing. We also, which we were a little surprised to see actually, didn't see a difference or association with fatigue to jump height, hand strength, which was a little surprising to us, because we would have expected that these individuals suffering from unexplained fatigue, they maybe were not as strong as the others. But we could not measure it. But we could see that there was an association between triglycerides and vitality and the body mass index, which was maybe not so surprising. So essentially what we saw was that, yes, these damaging molecules, the reactive oxygen species, they were related to vitality score. Also some parameters showing the state of metabolism in the cell. Then we saw physical strength is not associated, body mass index is associated, and then triglycerides, which could be associated also with cardiovascular diseases. So what are the messages here, except that perhaps we have few candidates for biomarkers? Well, it is actually that we should take it seriously when middle-aged people say they feel tired for no reason, because that is not normal. And also the fact that just because you are tired, or you're not tired just because you're old. So maybe consider what the cause and do something about it. And that will of course depend on how you feel tired. So just to end this talk, I just want to end with a citation from the famous Swedish instructor, Ingmar Bergman, who says that to grow old is like climbing a mountain. You get a little shortness of breath, but get much better views. So there's still a long way to go. Thank you.
We're going to open this for questions. So I think based on what we have just heard, the topic covered, ranged, and covered all sorts of information. Anybody please feel free to ask anything, except, of course, how to prevent aging, because I don't think Lene is going to be able to provide you any advice there.
I thought I would stress that it's a normal process.
I don't think any of us are here to hear that.
It cannot.
We really wanted you to tell us something a little more tangible. Anybody has any thoughts? If not, maybe I can offer a question that is not directly related to aging, but to the efforts of University of Nova Gorica. It's no secret that we have also embarked on an interest as a university to establish research in this field. And what have your experiences been, and what do you think have been most important in building a successful center that has obviously attracted support, provided interest that resulted in funding, and how did you do it?
Well, one thing that I think has been important for our center is to pick the people that can have something in common, relate to a common question. The other thing that is important is money, because a startup grant like this that is earmarked to this kind of activity, so it's not that people get money from this grant and then they can do whatever they like. They have to do specific projects that are in the application, so it's not just a big check. I mean, there are research plans, and I think that has made a difference because in our case, most of the researchers, they did not have a long track record in aging research. They were excellent researchers, but in different areas. So many of them really had to change their research and become aging researchers. And that's not easy because it can take easily 20 or 30 years to build up a research career. So I think that has been extremely important in our case, because this interdisciplinary approach is quite challenging in many ways. It is well known that researchers they get evaluated very often of their publications and which journal they are publishing in. So there are prestigious journals that many people would like to publish in because that will be an advantage when they have to apply for grants. Studies like this one I just presented, that's not a traditional study because they're researchers. I didn't mention all the studies from social science, epidemiology, etc. But it's really a mixture of many different disciplines. And there are not really many journals that take these kinds of papers. And if they do, they are not the classical prestigious journals. Right. So there were many risk factors also for the scientists that entered the center, because there might be they had to leave to a certain extent their own field, and then we have had a lot of support from the university, and I think that's also important. And the fact that you actually move physically together is also contributing to that. You feel you feel an identity
within the same effort. Yeah. Yes. Anybody? Yes.
One maybe very simple question. At the beginning you showed the age profiles for women and men, and to me it looks that in the development of these profiles during the years, if I remember correctly, these profiles were relatively symmetric back in time, but are not that much symmetric in present time. So which means that is there a reason why women are doing better and better and men are doing worse?
There are theories that women sort of they were maybe not smoking so much, maybe not drinking so much as men, or maybe they just have a better genetic makeup that makes them live longer.
But it's true that the age is going up. So maybe some effects.
The age is getting up, and that's also improved health care that is contributing to the fact that we get older and older, definitely. But at some point, there must also be other factors that is contributing to this increased longevity, really. That's what these measures.
I think it's the shoes. It's high heels, keeps mitochondria working better. I have a question on biology. Because of such a complex question being asked and aging being a normal process, how do you separate what is the cause and what is the effect of aging? You know what I mean? So when you're investigating any kind of biological parameter, how do you decide whether that is a cause that may accelerate or just an effect of aging process itself? What would be a useful marker?
Well, I would use model organisms, because I think that if you want to address that question, you really have to figure out which biological pathways are important for the normal aging process, and that's to a large extent unknown. I showed a few here, but that's clearly very, very simple. I mean, there are many, many more. That is much more complex than this. So I think that basic research, essentially, if we understand how a normal cell is behaving, then I think we will also be able to address, so what is the consequence of this cell not being normal? It could be disease, it could be premature aging, but premature aging models might also actually address this question to a certain extent.
Yes.
I wanted to ask.
Mia.
Sorry. Hello. I wanted to ask about these age-related genes you mentioned. I wonder how many of them they really discovered, and how they and on what, let's say, biological evidences are which show that they are, let's say, that you can predict healthy aging of somebody or not with them. And I would like to know also about progeria. Do you also test and check these very fast aging people who are, let's say, at 8 years, they are almost 80 years old or more?
Well, I think a lot of genes were discovered by comparing young and old animals, for example. Animal models has been very useful in identifying some of the aging genes. And also, when you have knocked out some of these genes, you can see the phenotype progeria, you can see whatever, premature aging, osteoporosis, all kinds, maybe also even Alzheimer's models now. So animal models has really been very, very useful in identifying these aging genes. But also epidemiology studies where you have looked at certain genes in young people and compared to a lot of studies with centenarians, for example, people that get 100 years. So which gene variant do they have? Do they share a common variant, the people that get over 100 years old? So studies like that have been very useful in identifying these genes.
Thank you. Question?
Thank you for the nice talk. I think I would like your comment on how you deal with translating all this science to practice in your in your country? Because in my opinion, we have in Slovenia especially big gap in that field.
So how we translate the research into
dissemination of these results, which are quite broad already now, to final users. So do you have a net of clubs, then senior homes, and similarly, how do you simply translate all this knowledge to the end users?
Well, different ways, but one way we translate findings from the center is, for example, in our collaborations with the municipalities, so they can use the research that we produce in the center to help or improve daily life of the citizens in this municipality. That's one way. The other way we do it is to have, of course, collaborations with industry. But there's nothing new in that. But that is also a way that we translate our research. And then we try really to find other ways to communicate our research, not just to newspapers or television. For example, we are participating in something called Science Theater, where that's an event where there's a play, and then there will be a researcher explaining some facts. It could be, let's say, we have done one diabetes. So there would be an event here showing people that have problems with overweight and so on, and then the scientists will stand next to them and give some facts about the biology of diabetes and how it's affecting the person. And also exhibitions. For example, we have one group leader in our center. He's heading the Medical Museum of University of Copenhagen, and they are specialists in making exhibitions, and he has made exhibitions about aging and different things, which is a very good way for people who are not experts and not scientists to understand what are we actually doing. And if you understand that, you will also be able to figure out which of this knowledge can I use in my company or in my nursery home or in my hospital or whatever it is. So that's a different way. And of course, we also participate in European networks and the traditional.
Maybe any permanent educational programs for strength and conditioning coaches or physiotherapists or something like that come out from your program?
We have physiotherapists in the center. So one program is...
I mean specialized in aging interventions or anything like that.
Yes, they are, specialized in aging. Some of them are doing research in the center, but we have also, they are also collaborating with nursery homes, for example, where they get information about how this and that will work on elderly people, what happens to their muscles when they are in bed for 2 weeks, for example, and things like that. So we have a lot of collaboration also with the hospitals, and on top of that we also have, of course, master and PhD programs. So we're also educating people. We're not just a research center, we're also educating students.
I think I'm going to add and try to bring your question and your answer together, because I think one of the key aspects, again, with the complex issue of aging being the case, is yes, we can start understanding and we can publish and we can be very successful. And how are we going to use the knowledge that we have and actually make a difference in our communities, in a home of assisted living, really enable people to be able to help themselves longer and maintain longer life. And that is not a trivial question. How do you translate making a sensor, a chip? It's easy, right? You find a company, they will make it, they will sell it, people will buy it, and we're done. The complexity of addressing these changes, I think, will require some, what you suggest, innovative approaches. So how do I deliver my knowledge now to the population that really needs it? And what you have listed is a wonderful list to start with and then partially implement through maybe physiotherapy and other help.
We will see. We're not there yet because we are only 4 or 5 years down the line. But I can add one thing is that the mayor of Copenhagen, he is really very interested in this, and they have co-sponsored a professorship with University of Copenhagen, a professor in our center. And the only purpose is really for the city of Copenhagen to figure out what research can we actually use to improve the life for elderly citizens. So that's also a good way to get your results into society translated.
Anybody else? Yes, Vlad.
Maybe related to the question that you posed before, but on the other side.
Just wait a second.
On the side of producing the product, so to say, you have listed a number of areas which are relevant for such an interdisciplinary field. Do you feel they are all equally developed? Can they equally contribute, or do you believe there are some gaps in one of the fields which would need to be still advanced? Or
well, I think essentially any scientific area would be relevant for aging. I have listed some that are in our center because you also need to be focused. I think it's very important to be a little focused if you want to start a center. So therefore we could not include everything, but diet, clearly, we have not researched in diet in our center, but that's extremely important from my point of view. And there are other important things, for example, economics. So I cannot say whether one area is more important than the other for healthy aging. For longevity, maybe. But for healthy aging, I think all the social sciences and economic, etc., they play actually an important role.
I didn't actually mean that one of the areas would be more important, but obviously they are all, and they are more than you listed, and I would agree.
Many more.
But is there maybe the stage of the advancement of a certain area that is preventing new discoveries in a more pronounced way than in the other areas eventually?
I would say in biology you don't really know very much about aging. But on the other hand, in Denmark at least, social aging, it is almost an unexplored field. And so those are two very important areas, I think. But then I can go on neuroscience. I mean, do we really know what happens with cognitive decline? You could say that's biology, but there are many gaps there, and there are many unexplored areas.
Any more? Then thank you again for a wonderful presentation.